March 15th, 2019. Jake Morrison walked into his local auto shop for what should have been a routine oil change. But when mechanics found fresh grease under his fingernails and noticed the eagle tattoo on his forearm, they knew something wasn't right. Security cameras captured him leaving the shop, but Jake Morrison was never seen again. And what police discovered in his abandoned car would leave investigators questioning everything they thought they knew about missing persons cases. But here's what's really haunting. If Jake Morrison was supposedly working on his own car that morning, then whose grease was really under his fingernails? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cut through the dirty windows of Murphy's auto shop like a knife through butter. Jake Morrison pushed open the heavy glass door at exactly 8:15 on March 15th. The bell above the door made a sharp ding that echoed through the waiting room. Jake wore his usual blue jeans and a white t-shirt that showed off the eagle tattoo spread across his left forearm. The black ink seemed to move as his muscles shifted under his skin. Behind the counter sat Betty Murphy, a woman with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had run this shop with her husband for 37 years. Betty knew every customer who walked through that door. She knew their cars, their problems, and their stories. But something felt different about Jake that morning. Something she could not quite put her finger on. Jake walked up to the counter with heavy steps. His work boots made loud sounds on the cracked tile floor. Each step seemed to echo longer than it should have. Betty looked up from her paperwork and smiled the same smile she gave every customer. But her eyes stayed on Jake's hands. Dark grease filled the spaces under his fingernails. The black substance looked fresh, like he had been working on an engine just minutes before walking in. "Morning, Jake," Betty said. Her voice carried the weight of all those years spent talking to customers. "Here for your oil change?" Jake nodded but did not speak right away. He placed both hands on the counter, and Betty could see the grease more clearly now. It was not the old, dried kind that mechanics got from working on cars for hours. This grease looked wet and new, like it had gotten there recently. "Very recently, yeah," Jake finally said. His voice sounded different today, deeper, more tired. "My truck needs it bad. Been putting it off too long." Betty wrote down his information on a yellow slip of paper. The pen scratched against the paper in the quiet morning air. Outside, traffic moved slowly down Main Street. A few early commuters headed to work. The normal sounds of a small town waking up. But inside the shop, something felt wrong. Jake's truck sat in the parking lot outside. A red Ford pickup, maybe 10 years old. Nothing special about it. Betty had changed the oil in that truck 6 times before. She knew every dent and scratch on its surface. The truck looked normal from where she sat. But normal things could hide secrets. Should take about 30 minutes, Betty said. She handed Jake the yellow slip. When their fingers touched, she felt how cold his hands were. Too cold for a warm March morning. "You can wait here or walk around town if you want." Jake took the slip and looked at it like he had never seen one before. His eyes moved over the writing slowly. Betty watched his face. Something was happening behind those eyes. Something she could not read. "I think I'll wait," Jake said. He walked to one of the plastic chairs in the waiting room. The chairs were old and cracked from years of use. Jake sat down heavily, like his body weighed more than it should. Betty called back to the garage. "Tom, Jake Morrison's truck is ready for service." Tom Murphy came out from the garage, wiping his hands on a dirty rag. Tom was 62 years old and had been fixing cars since he was 16. His hands were permanently stained with grease and oil. He could tell what was wrong with a car just by listening to it run. Tom had seen everything in his 46 years of working on cars, but he had never seen anything like what he was about to find. Tom took the keys from Betty and walked outside to get Jake's truck. The morning air felt cool against his skin. Birds sang in the oak trees that lined Main Street. Everything seemed peaceful and normal. Tom climbed into the truck and turned the key. The engine started right away with a low rumble. Nothing sounded wrong, but looks and sounds could lie. He drove the truck into the garage bay and raised it up on the lift. The hydraulic system made its usual whining sound as the truck rose into the air. Tom had done this same job thousands of times before. Oil change, check the filters, look for problems. Simple work that he could do with his eyes closed. But when Tom crawled under the truck to drain the oil, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The oil drain plug was already loose. Not just loose, but barely holding on. Like someone had started to remove it, but stopped before finishing the job. Tom had worked on this truck before. He always tightened the drain plug properly. Someone had been under this truck recently. Someone who knew what they were doing. Tom's hands shook slightly as he removed the drain plug completely. The old oil poured out into the drain pan below, but mixed in with the black oil was something else. Something that should not have been there. Small pieces of metal. Tiny shavings that looked like they came from somewhere else. Somewhere they did not belong. Back in the waiting room, Jake sat perfectly still. He had not moved from his chair in 20 minutes. His hands rested on his knees, and Betty could still see that fresh grease under his nails. She tried to focus on her paperwork, but her eyes kept moving back to Jake, the way he sat, the way he breathed. Even the way he looked at the clock on the wall seemed wrong. The clock showed 8:45. 15 minutes had passed since Jake arrived. In a normal world, that meant 15 minutes closer to finishing the oil change. But this did not feel like a normal world anymore. Time seemed to move differently when something was wrong. Minutes felt like hours. Seconds stretched out like rubber bands. Jake suddenly stood up from his chair. The movement was quick and sharp, like he had been shocked by electricity. Betty looked up from her papers. Jake walked to the window that faced the garage. He pressed his face close to the glass and looked through it like he was searching for something. Or someone. "Everything okay, Jake?" Betty asked. Her voice carried worry now. The kind of worry that came from 40 years of knowing when things were not right. Jake did not answer right away. He kept looking through the window. His breath made small clouds of fog on the glass. Finally, he turned around and looked at Betty with eyes that seemed different than before. Darker, more distant. "I just remembered something I need to do," Jake said. His words came out fast, like he was in a hurry. "Can I get my keys back? I'll come back later for the oil change." Betty felt her heart speed up. This was not normal. Customers did not leave in the middle of service. Not unless something was very wrong. "Tom's already started working on your truck," Betty said. She tried to keep her voice calm and normal. "It won't take much longer." Jake moved toward the counter. His steps were faster now, more urgent. The eagle tattoo on his arm seemed to spread its wings wider as his muscles tensed. Betty could smell something on him now. Something sharp and metallic. Like the smell of blood mixed with motor oil. "I really need to go," Jake said. His voice was higher now, more strained. Something came up. Something important. Betty picked up the phone to call Tom in the garage. But before she could dial, Jake reached across the counter and grabbed her wrist. His grip was strong and cold. The fresh grease under his nails left dark marks on her skin. "Please," Jake said. His eyes looked desperate now, wild, like an animal caught in a trap. "I just need my keys." Betty felt fear creep up her spine like ice water. This was not the Jake Morrison she knew. This was someone else wearing Jake's face and clothes. Someone dangerous. In the garage, Tom had finished draining the old oil and was installing a new filter. But his mind kept going back to those metal shavings. They looked like they came from engine parts, but not from Jake's engine. This metal was newer, shinier, like it came from a different kind of machine altogether. Tom wiped his hands on his rag and walked back toward the office. He wanted to ask Jake some questions about his truck, about where he had been driving lately, about what kind of work he had been doing. But when Tom looked through the window into the waiting room, he saw something that made him freeze in place. Jake had Betty's wrist in his hand. Betty's face was white with fear. Her eyes were wide and scared. Tom had seen that look before, many years ago, when a drunk customer had gotten angry about a repair bill. But this was different. This was worse. Tom moved quickly but quietly toward the door that connected the garage to the office. He wanted to get closer without Jake seeing him. Through the thin wall he could hear voices. Jake's voice tight with stress. Betty's voice shaking with fear. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I know what you're thinking," Jake was saying. But you don't understand. This is bigger than you think. Bigger than all of us. Tom pressed his ear against the door. His heart pounded so hard, he worried Jake might hear it through the wall. "Jake, you're scaring me," Betty said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Whatever's wrong, we can figure it out. Just let go of my hand. You saw it, didn't you?" Jake said. "You saw the grease." "I know you did. I can see it in your eyes." Tom's blood went cold. Jake knew they had noticed something. But what did the grease mean? Where had it come from? And why was Jake so worried about them seeing it? "I don't know what you mean," Betty lied, but her voice gave her away. She did know. She had seen the fresh grease under Jake's nails. She had wondered about it. And somehow Jake knew she had wondered. Tom reached for his cell phone to call the police. But as he pulled it from his pocket, it slipped from his shaking hands and clattered to the concrete floor. The sound echoed through the garage like a gunshot. Everything went quiet in the office. No voices, no movement, just silence that felt heavy and dangerous. Then Tom heard footsteps. Fast footsteps moving toward the door. Jake was coming. Tom grabbed a wrench from his workbench and held it like a weapon. His 46 years of fixing cars had made him strong, but he was 62 years old. If Jake wanted to hurt him, he probably could. The door burst open and Jake stood there, wild-eyed and breathing hard. His eagle tattoo seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. The grease under his nails looked darker now, almost black in the fluorescent light of the garage. "You heard everything," Jake said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. Tom raised the wrench higher. "I don't want any trouble, Jake. Just take your truck and go." Jake looked at Tom, then at the wrench, then back at Tom's face. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that this situation had moved beyond normal problems and normal solutions. "You don't understand," Jake said again. His voice was calmer now, but that made it more frightening, not less. "If I leave now, they'll know I was here. They'll know you saw the grease. They'll know you heard us talking. Who will know?" Tom asked. But even as he said the words, he was not sure he wanted to hear the answer. Jake looked at the clock on the garage wall. 9:05. 20 minutes had passed since he first walked into the shop. 20 minutes that had changed everything for everyone in that building. "The people who put this grease under my nails," Jake said. "The people who told me to come here this morning. The people who are watching us right now." Tom felt his blood turn to ice water. He looked around the garage, searching the shadows for signs of other people. But he saw nothing except cars and tools and the normal things that belonged in an auto shop. "There's nobody here but us," Tom said. Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that meant something terrible was about to happen. "Look closer," Jake said. Tom followed Jake's eyes to the security camera mounted in the corner of the garage. The little red light that showed the camera was recording had been blinking steadily all morning, but now it was blinking faster, much faster, like it was sending some kind of signal. "They've been watching since I got here," Jake said. "They know everything we've said, everything we've done, and now they know that you know." Tom's hands began to shake harder. The wrench felt heavy in his grip. "Know what? What do I know?" Jake looked at Tom with eyes that were sad and scared and sorry, all at the same time. "You know that Jake Morrison didn't drive his truck here this morning to get an oil change. You know that Jake Morrison has been missing for 3 days. And now you know that whoever I am, I'm not Jake Morrison." The words hit Tom like a physical blow. He staggered backward against his workbench. Tools clattered to the floor around his feet. Everything he thought he knew about this morning had just turned upside down. "Then who are you?" Tom whispered. The man who looked like Jake Morrison glanced at the security camera again. The red light was blinking so fast now it looked almost solid. Time was running out for all of them. "I'm someone who made a mistake," the man said. "Someone who thought he could pretend to be Jake Morrison long enough to figure out what happened to him. But I got sloppy. I didn't clean all the evidence off my hands. And now we're all in danger." Betty appeared in the doorway between the office and the garage. Her face was pale and streaked with tears. "Tom, I called the police. They're on their way." The man who was not Jake Morrison looked at Betty, then at Tom, then at the security camera with its rapidly blinking light. He seemed to be calculating something in his head. weighing options, making decisions that would affect all their lives. How long until they get here? He asked. 5 minutes, Betty said. Maybe less, the man nodded slowly. That might be enough time. Or it might not be enough time at all. He walked to Jake's truck, still raised up on the lift. The old oil continued to drip slowly into the drain pan below. Each drop made a tiny sound as it hit the metal. Plip, 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 like a clock counting down to something terrible. You found the metal shavings, the man said to Tom. It was not a question. Tom nodded. His throat felt too tight to speak. Those shavings came from the machine they used to kill Jake Morrison, the man said. The machine they'll use to kill all of us if we don't figure out what Jake discovered before he disappeared. Outside, the sound of sirens began to grow louder. But instead of relief, Tom felt only more fear, because he was beginning to understand that the police might not be coming to help them. They might be coming to make sure that whatever Jake Morrison had discovered would stay buried forever. The man who was not Jake Morrison looked at the approaching sirens, then at Tom and Betty, then at his hands with their telltale grease stains. 3 days ago, Jake Morrison found something he wasn't supposed to find, the man said. Something that powerful people want to keep secret. Something worth killing for. The sirens were getting closer now. Maybe 2 minutes away. Maybe less. I came here this morning hoping to find clues about what Jake discovered, the man continued. But instead, I think I just signed all our death warrants. He looked at Tom and Betty with eyes that held a terrible knowledge. Because now you know that Jake Morrison is dead, and you know that someone is pretending to be him. And most importantly, you know that whatever Jake found is still out there, waiting to be discovered. The security camera's red light suddenly stopped blinking and went solid. Someone, somewhere, had just made a decision about what to do with the 3 people in Murphy's auto shop. The man who was not Jake Morrison walked toward the garage door. But before he reached it, he turned back one last time. If we all survive the next 5 minutes, he said, I'll tell you everything I know about what really happened to Jake Morrison. But first, we need to figure out how to stay alive long enough to learn the truth. The sirens were very close now. Close enough to hear individual wails instead of just a distant sound. Tom and Betty looked at each other with the same terrible understanding. This morning had started like any other morning, but it was going to end like no morning they had ever experienced before. And somewhere in the distance, getting closer every second, were people who would do anything to make sure that the real story of Jake Morrison never saw the light of day. The police sirens stopped right outside Murphy's auto shop. Tom could hear car doors slamming shut in the parking lot, heavy footsteps on gravel, the sound of radios crackling with static voices. But something felt wrong about these sounds. They were too organized, too planned. Like the people arriving already knew exactly what they would find inside. The man who was not Jake Morrison moved quickly to the garage's side window. He peered through the dirty glass at the parking lot. 3 police cars had arrived, but they were not parked like cops, normally parked when responding to an emergency call. Instead of blocking the exits, they had formed a careful line facing the building, like they were protecting something instead of investigating something. How many officers did you see? The man asked Betty. Betty wiped tears from her face with shaking hands. I don't know. I just called 911 and said we needed help. I didn't count anything. The man studied the police cars through the window. 6 officers had gotten out, but they were not moving toward the building yet. They stood in a tight group near their cars, talking in low voices. One of them kept looking at his watch. Another one kept glancing at the security camera mounted on the outside of the building. They're waiting for something, the man said. Or someone. Tom set down his wrench and moved closer to the window. The officers outside looked normal enough. Dark blue uniforms, shiny badges, standard equipment on their belts. But their body language was all wrong. They moved like soldiers, not like small-town cops responding to a distress call. Waiting for what? Tom asked. Before the man could answer, a 4th police car pulled into the parking lot. This one was different from the others. Newer, cleaner, with tinted windows that made it impossible to see who was inside. The car parked directly in front of the shop's main entrance, and the engine kept running. A tall woman in a dark suit got out of the passenger side. She was not wearing a police uniform. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she wore sunglasses even though the morning sun was not that bright. She walked with the kind of confidence that came from being in charge of important things, dangerous things. The woman spoke briefly with the uniformed officers, then looked directly at the security camera mounted above the shop's front door. She nodded once, like she was confirming something with someone who was watching from far away. "Federal agents," the man whispered. "This is much worse than I thought." Betty's face went even paler. "Federal agents? Why would federal agents come to an auto shop?" The man turned away from the window and looked at Tom and Betty with eyes full of fear and regret. Because Jake Morrison didn't just stumble onto some small town secret. He found something that threatens national security, something that important people will kill to protect. Outside, the woman in the dark suit was walking toward the front door. Her high heels made sharp clicking sounds on the concrete. Each step sounded like a countdown timer getting closer to 0. Tom felt his heart hammering against his ribs. What kind of national security? What could Jake have found in a place like this? The man looked around the garage at all the ordinary things. Toolboxes and car lifts and oil drums and spare parts. Nothing looked important enough to attract federal attention. But looks could be very deceiving. 3 days ago, Jake Morrison was driving home from work when he saw something he shouldn't have seen, the man said. A truck convoy moving through town in the middle of the night. Military vehicles with no markings, heading toward the old missile facility outside town. Tom knew the place the man was talking about. Everyone in town knew about it. The facility had been built during the Cold War, but was officially shut down in the 1990s. The government claimed it was empty now. Just concrete bunkers and rusted fences with warning signs that kept curious teenagers away. "That place has been closed for 30 years, Tom said. "That's what they want people to think," the man replied. But Jake followed those trucks. He climbed the fence and got inside the facility. And what he found there changed everything. The clicking sound of high heels stopped right outside the front door. Through the window, Tom could see the woman in the dark suit, standing with her hand on the door handle. She was waiting for something. A signal, maybe, or orders from someone else. Betty moved closer to Tom and grabbed his arm. "What did Jake find?" The man looked at the security camera in the corner of the garage. Its red light was still glowing solid, which meant someone was watching everything they said and did. But maybe that did not matter anymore. Maybe it was too late to worry about who was listening. "The facility isn't empty," the man said. "It's full of equipment and people working on something called Project Blackbird. Something that has to do with controlling people's minds, using radio signals broadcast through cell phone towers." Tom felt the world tilt sideways. "That's impossible. That's science fiction." Jake thought so too, the man said, until he saw the test results. Files showing successful experiments on entire neighborhoods. People doing things they would never normally do. Buying products they didn't want. Voting for candidates they didn't support. Even committing crimes they had no memory of afterward. The front door opened with a loud creak. The woman in the dark suit stepped inside, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Their footsteps echoed through the small waiting room. Tom could hear them moving around, looking at things, searching for something specific. "Hello," the woman called out. Her voice was calm and professional, the kind of voice used by people who were very good at their jobs. "This is Agent Sarah Chen with the Department of Homeland Security. We received a report of a disturbance at this location." Tom, Betty, and the man who was not Jake Morrison stood frozen in the garage. None of them wanted to be the first to respond. None of them wanted to start a conversation that might end with all of them dead. "We know you're here," Agent Chen continued. "Your vehicles are in the parking lot, and the security system shows movement inside the building. Please come out so we can discuss this situation calmly and peacefully." The man gestured for Tom and Betty to stay quiet. Then he moved to the door between the garage and the office. He pressed his ear against the wood and listened carefully to the sounds on the other side. Agent Chen was moving around the waiting room. Her heels clicked on the tile floor as she examined Betty's desk and the paperwork scattered across it. Tom could hear papers rustling, drawers being opened and closed. The woman was searching for something specific. Jake Morrison's service record shows he brought his vehicle here regularly, Agent Chen said. She was talking louder now, making sure her voice carried into the garage. We have reason to believe he may have shared sensitive information with the staff at this facility. The man who was not Jake Morrison looked at Tom with wide eyes. The federal agents thought Jake had told them something important. They thought the people at Murphy's auto shop knew about Project Blackbird. We also have reason to believe, Agent Chen continued, that someone has been impersonating Jake Morrison since his disappearance 3 days ago. Someone who may be attempting to continue his unauthorized investigation into classified government operations. Betty covered her mouth to keep from making any sound. Tom felt sweat running down his back despite the cool morning air. The federal agents knew almost everything. They knew Jake was dead. They knew someone was pretending to be him. And they knew that person had come to the auto shop looking for information. The man moved away from the door and gestured for Tom and Betty to follow him deeper into the garage. They walked carefully between the cars and equipment, trying not to make any noise that would give away their exact location. "There's something else," the man whispered when they reached the far corner of the garage. "Something I didn't tell you before." Jake Morrison didn't just find files about Project Blackbird. He copied them, downloaded everything onto a flash drive before he was caught. Tom felt his stomach clench with fear. "Where's the flash drive now?" "That's what everyone wants to know," the man said. "The people who killed Jake, the federal agents outside, and me." In the office, Agent Chen had finished searching Betty's desk and was now examining the service records for all the vehicles that had been worked on recently. Tom could hear her flipping through pages, looking for something that would tell her what Jake Morrison had been doing at the auto shop. "According to these records," Agent Chen said loudly, "Jake Morrison was scheduled for routine maintenance this morning, but the work order was never completed. Why would a customer leave in the middle of a service appointment?" The uniformed officers were moving around the waiting room now. Their heavy boots made different sounds than Agent Chen's high heels. More aggressive sounds. Less patient sounds. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, "the security footage shows 3 people in the garage area. 2 employees and 1 customer. But none of them have come forward to speak with us." "I'm aware of that, Officer Martinez," Agent Chen replied. "Which suggests they have something to hide." The man who was not Jake Morrison looked at Tom and Betty with desperate eyes. "Listen carefully. Jake hid the flash drive somewhere in this building before they caught him. Somewhere he thought it would be safe until someone could come back for it. I've been searching for 3 days, but I haven't found it yet." Betty's eyes were wide with terror, but she managed to whisper, "How do you know all this?" The man hesitated for a moment, like he was deciding how much truth to tell them. Then he looked at the security camera again and seemed to make up his mind. "Because I'm Jake's brother," he said. "My name is Mark Morrison. Jake called me the night before he disappeared. He told me about Project Blackbird and the flash drive. He said if anything happened to him, I should come here and look for it." Tom stared at Mark Morrison, trying to see the resemblance to Jake. They had similar builds and similar hair color, but their faces were different enough that Tom should have noticed. Would have noticed if he had been paying closer attention. "Why didn't you just call the police?" Betty asked. Mark's laugh was bitter and quiet. "Because Jake told me the local police chief was getting payments from the people running Project Blackbird. Because 3 other people who tried to investigate the missile facility have disappeared over the past 2 years. And because when I did try to contact the FBI, they told me there was no evidence that Jake Morrison had ever existed." The implications hit Tom like a physical blow. The government was not just covering up Project Blackbird. They were erasing people who threatened to expose it, making them disappear so completely that there was no record they had ever lived. In the office, Agent Chen was getting impatient. "I'm going to count to 30, she announced. If the people in the garage don't come out and speak with us voluntarily, we'll have to assume they're resisting a federal investigation. And that will change how we handle this situation. Mark looked around the garage desperately. The flash drive has to be here somewhere. Jake was too smart to leave it out in the open, but he would have hidden it somewhere I could find it. Somewhere that meant something to both of us. Tom tried to think like Jake Morrison. Where would someone hide something important in an auto shop? Somewhere safe but accessible. Somewhere that looked normal but could keep a secret. 1, Agent Chen began counting. Betty pointed toward Jake's truck, still raised up on the lift. What about his truck? Maybe he hid it in there somewhere. Mark shook his head. I already checked the truck. Looked everywhere I could think of. Under the seats, in the glove compartment, taped to the undercarriage. Nothing. 2. Tom looked at the oil drain pan under Jake's truck. The old oil was still dripping slowly into it, making tiny plinking sounds. But something about those sounds seemed wrong, like they were hitting something other than just metal. 3. Wait, Tom whispered. He grabbed a flashlight from his workbench and shined it into the drain pan. Floating in the used motor oil was a small plastic bag, sealed tight and weighted down with a metal washer to keep it submerged. 4. Mark saw what Tom was looking at, and his face lit up with hope. That's it. Jake always said the best place to hide something was right in plain sight. 5. Tom reached into the drain pan and pulled out the plastic bag. Inside was a small flash drive, completely protected from the oil by the watertight seal. Jake had dropped it into the drain pan before the last oil change, knowing it would stay hidden until someone specifically looked for it. 6. Mark took the flash drive from Tom with shaking hands. This contains everything Jake found about Project Blackbird. Names, dates, locations, financial records. Enough evidence to shut down the operation and send a lot of important people to prison. 7. But even as Mark held the flash drive, Tom realized they still faced an impossible problem. They had the evidence, but they were trapped in a building surrounded by federal agents who would kill them to get it back. 8. Agent Chen's voice was getting harder, more threatening. I want to remind everyone present that interfering with a federal investigation is a serious crime. Obstruction of justice carries a penalty of up to 5 years in federal prison. 9. Mark looked at Tom and Betty with the desperation of a drowning man. We need to get this information to the media, to someone who can't be bought or threatened into keeping quiet. But first we need to get out of here alive. 10. Tom looked around the garage for options. There was a back door that led to the alley behind the building, but Agent Chen probably had people watching it. There were windows, but they were too small for adults to climb through. And there was the service bay door, but opening it would make too much noise. 11. The storm drain, Betty whispered suddenly. There's a storm drain in the floor near the back wall. It connects to the sewer system that runs under the whole downtown area. Tom remembered the drain Betty was talking about. It was installed years ago to handle water that came in during heavy rains. The cover was heavy cast iron, but it could be lifted if you knew how to do it. 12. Mark looked at the storm drain cover, then back at Tom and Betty. Where does the sewer system come out? About 6 blocks from here, Tom said, near the old railroad bridge. But the tunnels are narrow and dark, and they might be flooded from the spring rains. 13. It's better than staying here and getting killed, Mark said. He put the flash drive in his pocket and moved toward the storm drain. Help me get this cover up. Tom and Mark worked together to lift the heavy iron cover. It came up slowly, revealing a dark hole that dropped down into the underground tunnel system. The smell that rose from the opening was not pleasant, but it smelled like freedom. 14. Betty looked down into the dark tunnel and shivered. I don't know if I can do this. I'm 63 years old. What if I get stuck down there? Tom put his hand on her shoulder. Betty, if we stay here, we're all going to die. Agent Chen isn't here to ask us questions. She's here to make sure we never tell anyone what we've learned. 15. Mark was already climbing down into the tunnel. The water's only about 6 inches deep, he called up softly, and I can see light coming from the other direction. We can make it. 16. Betty took a deep breath and started climbing down into the tunnel. Tom helped her, making sure she had solid footing on the slippery concrete. Then he followed her down, pulling the iron cover back into place above them. 17. The tunnel was dark and cold and smelled like decades of rainwater and urban runoff. But it was also their only chance of getting out alive. Mark used his phone's flashlight to show them the way, and they began moving slowly through the knee-deep water toward the distant light. 18. Behind them, Tom could hear Agent Chen's voice getting closer to the garage. Her footsteps were moving toward the door that separated the office from the work area. In a few seconds, she would discover they were gone. 19. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever. Water splashed around their legs as they moved, and the sound echoed off the concrete walls. Tom worried that the noise would give them away, but there was no choice except to keep moving forward. 20. They reached a junction where several tunnels came together. Mark stopped and looked around, trying to decide which direction to go. His phone's flashlight showed tunnels leading in 4 different directions, but only one of them had light coming from the far end. 21. This way, Mark whispered, pointing toward the tunnel with light. That has to be the way to the railroad bridge. They continued moving through the water, which was getting deeper as they went. Soon, it was up to their waists, and Betty was having trouble keeping her balance on the slippery tunnel floor. 22. Behind them, much fainter now, they could hear Agent Chen finish her countdown and begin shouting orders to the other officers. Doors were being kicked in. Equipment was being moved around. The federal agents had discovered the empty garage. 23. Tom helped Betty through a particularly deep section of water where the tunnel dipped down before rising again. The current was stronger here, trying to pull them off their feet. But they managed to stay upright and keep moving toward the light. 24. Mark stopped suddenly and held up his hand for silence. From somewhere behind them, echoing through the tunnel system, came the sound of the storm drain cover being lifted. Agent Chen had found their escape route. 25. They're coming, Mark whispered. We need to move faster. But moving faster in the dark tunnel was dangerous. The concrete was slick with algae and debris. One wrong step could mean a broken leg or a head injury that would stop them permanently. 26. They could see the tunnel exit ahead now, a circle of daylight that meant safety and freedom. But it was still 50 yards away, and the sound of pursuers was getting closer behind them. 27. Betty stumbled and nearly fell into the water. Tom caught her arm and helped her regain her footing. But the delay had cost them precious seconds. Seconds they could not afford to lose. 28. Mark reached the tunnel exit first and climbed out into the daylight. Then he reached back to help Betty up. Tom was right behind her, climbing out of the dark tunnel and into the morning sun near the old railroad bridge. 29. They were free, but they were not safe. Agent Chen and her team would be out of the tunnel in minutes, and then the real chase would begin. They had the flash drive with evidence of Project Blackbird, but they still needed to find someone they could trust to help them expose the truth. 30. Mark looked at the flash drive in his pocket, then at Tom and Betty, then at the city spreading out around them. Somewhere in that city were people who would help them. People who would listen to the truth about what the government was doing to its own citizens. But first, they had to stay alive long enough to find those people. And with federal agents hunting them and local police on the government payroll, that was going to be the hardest thing any of them had ever done. The hunt for the truth about Jake Morrison had only just begun. The morning sun felt warm on their faces as Tom, Betty, and Mark climbed out of the storm drain near the old railroad bridge. But the warmth did not make them feel safe. Behind them, echoing through the concrete tunnels, came the sound of boots splashing through water. Agent Chen and her team were following their trail, getting closer with every passing minute. Mark pulled the flash drive from his pocket and looked at it like it was both a treasure and a curse. The small plastic device contained enough information to destroy Project Blackbird and save thousands of innocent people from government mind control. But it also made them targets that would be hunted until they were dead. "We need to find someone we can trust," Mark said. His voice was quiet but urgent. "Someone who can't be bought or threatened into keeping quiet about what's on this drive." Tom wiped mud and sewer water from his clothes and looked around the area near the railroad bridge. This part of town was mostly abandoned buildings and empty lots. Not many people came here during the day, which made it good for hiding, but bad for finding help. Betty was shivering from the cold water and the fear. Her grey hair was wet and stringy, and her clothes clung to her thin frame. She looked older than her 63 years, like the morning's events had aged her by a decade. "What about the newspaper?" Betty suggested. "The editor is a good man. He's lived in this town for 40 years. He wouldn't be part of some government conspiracy." Mark shook his head. Jake tried the newspaper first. The editor told him there was no story and advised him to stop asking questions about the missile facility. 2 days later, Jake was dead. Tom felt his heart sink. If even the local newspaper was part of the cover-up, who could they trust? Who was left to help them expose the truth? From the storm drain behind them came the sound of voices. Agent Chen was talking to someone on her radio, reporting their escape and requesting backup. Soon there would be federal agents searching every street and building in the area. "The church," Tom said suddenly. "Pastor Williams at the Methodist Church. He's been fighting against government overreach for years. He gives sermons about protecting individual liberty and standing up to tyranny." Mark looked hopeful for the first time since they had escaped from Murphy's auto shop. "Where's the church?" "About 8 blocks from here," Tom replied. "But we'll have to be careful. The federal agents will be setting up roadblocks and searching every building." They began walking away from the railroad bridge, staying close to abandoned buildings and avoiding the main streets. The city felt different now, like every shadow could be hiding an enemy, and every passing car could contain federal agents looking for them. As they walked, Mark told them more about his brother Jake and the investigation that had gotten him killed. Jake Morrison had been a software engineer who worked for the city's computer department. His job gave him access to records and databases that most people never saw. Records that showed strange patterns in citizen behavior over the past 2 years. Jake noticed that people in certain neighborhoods were all buying the same products at the same time, Mark explained. Thousands of people suddenly deciding they needed the same brand of breakfast cereal or the same type of car insurance. But when he interviewed them, none of them could explain why they had made those choices. Betty stumbled over a broken piece of concrete, but kept walking. "That sounds like advertising. Companies spend millions of dollars trying to influence what people buy." "That's what Jake thought at first," Mark said. But then he found the voting records. In the last 3 elections, entire districts voted exactly the same way. Not just similar, but identical. Every single person in those areas voted for the same candidates in the same order. That's not normal human behavior. That's control. Tom felt a chill that had nothing to do with his wet clothes. The idea that someone could control people's thoughts and decisions was terrifying. It meant that democracy itself was an illusion, that citizens were just puppets dancing to strings pulled by invisible masters. They reached the edge of downtown and could see the Methodist Church in the distance. It was a simple white building with a tall steeple and stained glass windows that sparkled in the morning light. It looked peaceful and safe, like a place where truth could find protection. But as they got closer, Tom noticed something that made his blood run cold. There were 2 black cars parked across the street from the church. The cars had tinted windows and government license plates. Federal agents were already watching the church, waiting for them to arrive. "It's a trap," Tom whispered. "They knew we would come here." Mark cursed under his breath and pulled them back behind a nearby building. "How could they know?" "We just decided to come here 5 minutes ago." Betty's face went pale. "The security cameras at the shop. Agent Chen said they had been watching us since Jake arrived. They heard everything we said." The realization hit all 3 of them at the same time. The federal agents had not just been following their physical trail through the storm drain. They had been listening to their conversations and predicting their next moves. Every plan they made, every decision they discussed, was being broadcast to their enemies. "We need to assume they're listening to us right now." Mark said quietly. There could be listening devices in our clothes or tracking chips in our phones. Tom pulled his cell phone from his pocket and looked at it like it was a poisonous snake. The device that was supposed to keep him connected to the world had become a tool for his enemies to hunt him down. We should get rid of these, Tom said. Holding up his phone, Mark and Betty pulled out their phones as well. Mark removed the battery from his phone and threw the pieces into a nearby dumpster. Tom and Betty did the same, scattering the electronic parts so they could not be reassembled, but even without their phones, they were still in terrible danger. The federal agents knew they were in the area and would be searching every building and questioning every person until they found what they were looking for. We need to split up, Mark said. It's harder to track 3 people going in different directions than 3 people traveling together. Betty grabbed Tom's arm. No, I'm not leaving. We're in this together now. Mark looked at Betty with respect and sadness. Mrs. Murphy, these people will kill you without hesitation. Your only chance is to disappear until this is over. And what about the flash drive? Betty asked. What happens to the evidence against Project Blackbird if something happens to you? Mark had been thinking about the same problem. The flash drive contained the only proof of the government's mind control program, but carrying it made him a target. If he was captured or killed, the evidence would disappear, and the truth would be buried forever. We need to make copies, Mark said. Multiple copies hidden in different places. That way, even if they get the original, the information will survive. Tom looked around the area, searching for a place where they could access a computer and copy the files. Most of the businesses in this part of town were closed or abandoned, but he remembered seeing an internet cafe a few blocks away. Charlie's Computer Corner, Tom said. It's a small shop that rents computer time to people who don't have their own machines. The owner is an old hippie who doesn't trust the government. He might help us. They walked carefully through the back streets toward the computer shop, avoiding main roads where federal agents might be patrolling. The city felt like a war zone now, with enemies hiding behind every corner and danger lurking in every shadow. Charlie's Computer Corner was exactly what Tom had remembered. A cramped little shop filled with old computers and tangled cables. The smell of electronic equipment and stale coffee filled the air. Posters on the walls showed images of famous whistleblowers and quotes about government transparency. Charlie himself was a man in his 60s with long grey hair and a beard that reached his chest. He wore a tie-dyed t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days. His eyes were sharp and intelligent, like someone who had spent years watching the world and drawing his own conclusions about what he saw. "We need to use a computer," Mark said without explanation. "It's important." Charlie looked at the 3 of them, taking in their wet clothes and frightened expressions. He seemed to understand that they were in serious trouble without needing to hear the details. "Federal agents were here 20 minutes ago," Charlie said, "asking about 3 people who might be looking for computer access. I told them I hadn't seen anyone matching your description." Tom felt his heart racing. The federal agents were always one step ahead of them, anticipating their moves and setting traps wherever they might go. "Did you tell them the truth?" Betty asked. Charlie smiled. "I told them exactly what they needed to hear, but I didn't tell them what they wanted to know." Mark pulled out the flash drive and showed it to Charlie. "This contains evidence of government crimes against American citizens. We need to copy it and send it to people who can expose the truth." Charlie's eyes lit up with interest and determination. "How much evidence are we talking about?" "Everything," Mark said. "Names, dates, financial records, test results, victim lists. Enough to bring down the whole operation and send dozens of people to prison." Charlie led them to a computer in the back of the shop, away from the windows where passing agents might see them. The machine was old but functional, and it had access to secure internet connections that would be difficult for the government to trace. "First, we make multiple copies of the files," Charlie said. "Then we upload them to secure servers in different countries. Then we send copies to journalists, activists, and politicians who can't be bought or intimidated. Mark inserted the flash drive into the computer and began copying the files. The progress bar moved slowly across the screen, showing that there were thousands of documents and video files to transfer. Jake Morrison had been very thorough in documenting Project Blackbird. While the files copied, Charlie began compiling a list of people who might be willing to help expose the truth. Investigative reporters from major newspapers, civil rights lawyers, members of Congress who had opposed government surveillance programs, and activists from organizations that fought for digital privacy. We'll send the information to all of them at the same time, Charlie explained. That way, even if the government silences some of them, others will still have the evidence. Betty was watching the street through the shop's front window. There's a black car driving by slowly, she reported. The windows are tinted, and the driver seems to be looking at all the buildings. Tom joined Betty at the window and saw the car she was talking about. It was moving at about 5 miles per hour, much slower than normal traffic. The driver's attention was focused on the shops and businesses along the street, like he was searching for something specific. They're getting closer, Tom said. How much longer until the files are copied? Charlie checked the progress bar on the computer screen. Another 10 minutes for the copying, then 5 minutes to upload everything to the secure servers. Mark looked at the slow progress bar and felt time pressing down on him like a weight. 15 minutes might as well have been 15 hours when federal agents were hunting them block by block. Is there a back exit? Mark asked. Charlie nodded toward a door behind the computer workstations. That leads to the alley. But if they're watching the front, they're probably watching the back too. The black car had passed by the shop and continued down the street, but Tom knew it would be back. The federal agents were conducting a systematic search of the area, checking every building where 3 fugitives might be hiding. Tell us about Project Blackbird, Betty said to Mark. If we're going to die for this information, we should at least know what it is. Mark looked at the computer screen showing Jake's files and took a deep breath. Project Blackbird uses cell phone towers to broadcast low-frequency radio signals that affect human brain chemistry. The signals are too weak to cause obvious damage, but they're strong enough to influence mood, decision-making, and behavior. Charlie stopped typing and stared at Mark. That's impossible. Radio signals can't control people's minds. That's what everyone believes, Mark said. But the government has been perfecting this technology for 20 years. They started with small tests on prison populations, then expanded to military bases, and finally began testing on entire cities. Tom felt sick to his stomach. They've been testing us? On regular citizens? The files show successful experiments in 12 different cities, Mark confirmed. People being influenced to buy specific products, vote for certain candidates, and even commit crimes that serve government purposes. Betty sat down heavily in a nearby chair. How long has this been going on? The testing phase started 3 years ago, Mark said. But according to Jake's research, they're planning to expand the program nationwide within the next 6 months. Every cell phone tower in America would become a weapon for controlling citizen behavior. The implications were staggering. If the government could control what people thought and did, then freedom itself would become meaningless. Elections would be rigged, not by changing votes, but by controlling the minds of voters. Consumer choices would be dictated by corporate interests, working with government agencies. Even criminal behavior could be induced in people to justify increased police powers. Charlie had resumed typing, working frantically to upload the copied files to secure servers around the world. This is bigger than Watergate, he muttered. This is bigger than anything in American history. The computer screen showed that 8 minutes remained for the upload process. 8 minutes that felt like an eternity while federal agents searched the neighborhood building by building. There's something else, Mark said. Project Blackbird isn't just about controlling American citizens. The files show plans to use the technology against foreign populations as well. Entire countries could be destabilized by broadcasting signals that cause depression, aggression, or political unrest. Tom realized they were looking at evidence of the ultimate weapon, not nuclear bombs or biological warfare, but the power to control human consciousness itself. In the wrong hands, such technology could enslave the entire human race. Betty was crying now, tears running down her cheeks as she understood the full scope of what they had discovered. How did we let this happen? How did our government become so evil? It happened slowly, Charlie said without looking up from his typing. One crisis at a time, one emergency power at a time, one compromise with freedom at a time, until we woke up in a world where our own thoughts aren't our own anymore. The upload progress bar showed 5 minutes remaining. Outside, Tom could see another black car moving slowly down the street. This one stopped in front of the building next door, and 2 agents in dark suits got out and began questioning the business owner. They're getting very close, Tom reported. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes before they reach this shop. Mark looked at the computer screen, then at the door leading to the back alley, then at Tom and Betty. They were running out of time and options. Soon they would have to choose between completing the upload and escaping with their lives. Even if we don't survive this, Mark said, at least the truth will get out. Jake's sacrifice won't be meaningless. Charlie's fingers flew over the keyboard as he added final recipients to the email list. Journalists, activists, politicians, and ordinary citizens who deserved to know what their government was doing to them. The files would be sent to hundreds of people simultaneously, making it impossible for the government to silence all of them. 3 minutes left, Charlie announced. The servers in Switzerland and Iceland are ready to receive the files. Once the upload is complete, the information will be beyond the government's reach. Tom watched the federal agents move from building to building, getting closer with each stop. The agents were professional and thorough, showing identification to business owners and asking specific questions about 3 fugitives. Some of the business owners were cooperative, others were suspicious, but all of them eventually let the agents search their premises. 2 minutes, Charlie said. Almost there. Betty had stopped crying and was now watching the street with grim determination. She looked like a woman who had seen too much and learned too much to ever be innocent again. If we don't make it out of here, Betty said, I want you both to know that I'm proud to be part of this. My whole life I never did anything really important. But today, maybe we're saving the world. Mark looked at Betty with admiration. This quiet woman who had spent her life changing oil and rotating tires had become a hero in the fight against tyranny. The federal agents were now at the shop directly next door. Tom could see them through the window, showing photographs to the shop owner and asking questions. The photographs were probably pictures of Tom, Betty and Mark, taken from the security cameras at Murphy's auto shop. 1 minute, Charlie said. His voice was calm, but sweat was running down his forehead. The files are almost completely uploaded. The agents finished questioning the shop owner next door and began walking toward Charlie's computer corner. Tom could see their faces clearly now, cold, professional expressions that showed no trace of human emotion. These were people who followed orders without question, regardless of what those orders might be. 30 seconds, Charlie announced. The agents reached the front door of the shop. Tom could hear one of them speaking into a radio, reporting their location and requesting backup. They were preparing for a confrontation. 15 seconds, Charlie said. The door chime rang as the federal agents entered the shop. They moved with practiced efficiency, one agent covering the front, while the other advanced toward the back, where the computers were located. Upload complete, Charlie whispered. He ejected the flash drive and tossed it to Mark. The truth is out there now. It's beyond their reach. Agent Chen stepped into view, her dark suit immaculate despite the morning's chase through storm drains and abandoned buildings. Her eyes were cold and calculating as she looked at the 4 people gathered around the computer. Mark Morrison, she said in a voice like ice. You and your companions are under arrest for interfering with a federal investigation, accessing classified information, and conspiracy to commit espionage. Mark stood up slowly, still holding Jake's flash drive. The files have already been uploaded to secure servers and sent to journalists around the world. Project Blackbird is finished. Agent Chen smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something that other people did not know. Project Blackbird finished 6 months ago, she said. What you found was old information from a discontinued program. You've been chasing shadows and getting people killed for nothing. The words hit Mark like a physical blow. Everything Jake had died for, everything they had risked, had been based on outdated information about a program that no longer existed. But Charlie was shaking his head. "You're lying," he said. "The files show current dates and recent test results." Agent Chen's smile grew wider. "The files show exactly what we wanted them to show. Your brother found real information about a real program, but we've been feeding him false data for weeks. Every document he copied, every video he recorded, was carefully prepared to make him believe Project Blackbird was active and dangerous." Tom felt the world spinning around him. "You're saying this was all a trap?" "I'm saying your brother was a useful idiot who helped us identify other people who might pose a threat to national security," Agent Chen replied. "People like you, Mr. Murphy, people like Mrs. Murphy, people like Mr. Charlie here with his anti-government propaganda." Betty stood up from her chair, her fear replaced by anger. "You killed Jake Morrison for nothing? Just to set a trap for people who believe in freedom?" Agent Chen shrugged. "Jake Morrison killed himself when he decided to steal classified information. We simply used his theft to serve our larger purposes." Mark looked at the flash drive in his hand and realized it contained evidence of nothing. Fake files created by the government to lure freedom-loving citizens into revealing themselves. Jake had died believing he was exposing a great evil, but he had actually been dancing to music played by his enemies. "But the mind control technology is real," Charlie said. "Even if Project Blackbird was fake, the research exists." Agent Chen's expression grew more serious. "The research exists, and it's far more advanced than anything your brother found. But it's not called Project Blackbird, and it's not conducted at old missile facilities. The real program is hidden in plain sight, integrated into systems that every American uses every day." Tom felt a chill of understanding. The internet, social media, streaming services. "Much simpler than that," Agent Chen said. "But just as effective. And unlike your brother's fictional Project Blackbird, the real program has been active for years. It's been shaping American behavior so gradually that no one has noticed the changes." Mark realized they had been fighting the wrong enemy, while the real enemy had been controlling them all along. Jake's investigation had been allowed to continue because it focused attention on a fake program, while the real program operated undetected. "What happens to us now?" Betty asked. Agent Chen looked at each of them with the cold calculation of someone deciding their fate. "That depends on how cooperative you choose to be." Outside the computer shop, more black cars were arriving. The street was filling with federal agents, all of them focused on the small building where 4 people had just learned that everything they believed about truth and freedom had been carefully designed to deceive them. The real battle for America's mind was just beginning, Agent. Chen stood in the doorway of Charlie's computer corner, like a predator studying her prey. The morning light behind her created a dark silhouette that made her seem larger and more threatening than her actual size. Mark clutched Jake's flash drive tighter, even though he now knew it contained nothing but lies designed to trap people like him. "Cooperation," Agent Chen repeated, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "It's such a simple concept, yet so many people choose the difficult path instead." Charlie's fingers hovered over his keyboard, but the computer screen was now blank. The upload was complete, but the files they had sent around the world were worthless. Fake documents created by the same government they had hoped to expose. The bitter taste of defeat filled the small shop like smoke from a fire that could not be put out. Tom looked at Betty, who was standing beside her chair with her hands clenched into fists. Despite everything they had learned, despite the crushing revelation that their entire mission had been orchestrated by their enemies, The old woman's eyes still burned with defiance. She had lived 63 years in a free country, and she was not ready to surrender that freedom without a fight. "What kind of cooperation?" Mark asked. His voice was steady, but sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the cool morning air flowing through the shop's open door. Agent Chen stepped further into the shop, and 2 other agents followed behind her. They wore the same dark suits and emotionless expressions, like they had been manufactured in the same factory that produced government secrets and official lies. "The kind that keeps you alive," Agent Chen said. "The kind that allows you to go home to your families and pretend this morning never happened. The kind that serves the greater good of national security." Betty laughed, but it was not a happy sound. It was the laugh of someone who had seen too much truth in too short a time. "National security? Is that what you call controlling people's minds? Is that what you call murdering innocent citizens who ask too many questions?" Agent Chen's expression did not change, but something cold and dangerous flickered in her eyes. "Mrs. Murphy, you've lived in this small town your entire life. You've never seen the threats that exist beyond your comfortable little world. Terrorists, foreign agents, domestic extremists, people who would destroy everything you care about if we didn't stop them first, by becoming worse than them," Charlie asked. His voice carried the weight of decades spent watching government power grow while citizen freedom shrank. "By turning American citizens into puppets dancing to strings they can't even see." Agent Chen walked to the computer where Charlie had uploaded Jake's files. She looked at the blank screen like she was reading invisible words written there. "The American people can't handle the truth about the world we live in. They want to believe in simple stories about good and evil, freedom and tyranny. But the real world is more complex than that." Mark felt anger rising in his chest like hot liquid. "Complex enough to justify killing my brother? Complex enough to justify lying to the entire country about what you're doing to them? Your brother chose his fate when he broke the law," Agent Chen replied. "We gave him multiple chances to walk away, to forget what he thought he had found, to return to his normal life. He chose to continue digging instead." Tom stepped forward, placing himself between Agent Chen and Betty. His 46 years of working with his hands had made him strong, but he knew that strength would not help him against federal agents with guns and unlimited government authority. "What's the real program?" Tom demanded. "If Project Blackbird was fake, what's the real way you're controlling people's minds?" Agent Chen smiled again, and this time there was genuine amusement in her expression. "You're looking at it right now. Every smartphone, every social media account, every streaming service, every online purchase. The most effective mind control device ever created, and people pay their own money to carry it with them everywhere they go." The implications hit Tom like a physical blow. He thought about his own phone, which he had thrown away in pieces just an hour earlier. How many times each day had he looked at its screen? How many decisions had he made based on information that appeared there? How many thoughts had he believed were his own when they had actually been carefully planted by algorithms designed to influence his behavior? Betty's face had gone pale. "Our phones are controlling us?" "Not controlling," Agent Chen corrected. "Influencing, guiding, suggesting. The human mind is remarkably easy to manipulate if you understand how it works. Show people the right images, the right stories, the right advertisements, and they'll make the choices you want them to make while believing those choices are completely their own." Charlie was shaking his head slowly, like he was trying to deny what he was hearing. The internet was supposed to set information free. It was supposed to give people access to truth, and it does, Agent Chen said, along with lies, propaganda, misinformation, and carefully crafted narratives designed to serve specific purposes. The beauty of the system is that people think they're choosing what to believe, when actually they're being fed exactly the information we want them to have. Mark looked around the computer shop at all the machines Charlie used to help people access the internet. Every screen, every keyboard, every connection to the World Wide Web was potentially a tool for government manipulation. The technology that was supposed to empower citizens had become the means of their enslavement. How long has this been going on? Mark asked. Since the beginning, Agent Chen replied. Social media platforms weren't created by college students in dormitories. They were developed by intelligence agencies and then released to the public through carefully managed front companies. Every major technology corporation has intelligence operatives in key positions, guiding the development of algorithms that serve government interests. Tom felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew about the modern world was built on lies. The phones people used, the websites they visited, the news they read, the entertainment they watched, all of it was part of a vast system designed to control their thoughts and behaviors without them ever knowing it was happening. But people still have free will, Betty said desperately. People can still think for themselves. Agent Chen's laugh was soft and sad. Can they? When was the last time you made a decision without consulting your phone? When was the last time you formed an opinion without reading about it online first? When was the last time you bought something without seeing an advertisement for it? Betty opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The questions were harder to answer than they should have been. In the modern world, the line between independent thought and external influence had become so blurred that it was almost impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The real genius of the system, Agent Chen continued, is that it makes people feel like they're more informed and more connected than ever before. They have access to more information than any generation in human history. But that information is carefully curated to lead them to predetermined conclusions. Mark thought about his own online habits, the websites he visited, the news articles he read, the videos he watched. How many of his political opinions, his consumer preferences, his lifestyle choices had been influenced by algorithms designed to manipulate his thinking? Elections, Charlie whispered. You're controlling how people vote. We don't need to control how people vote, Agent Chen said. We control what information they receive about the candidates. We control which stories trend on social media. We control which advertisements they see and which issues they think are important. By the time they reach the voting booth, they're making choices that feel completely free, but are actually the result of months of careful psychological manipulation. Tom felt sick to his stomach. The foundation of American democracy. The idea that citizens could make informed choices about their government had been undermined by the very technology that was supposed to make them better informed. Why are you telling us this? Mark asked. If the system is so perfect, why reveal how it works? Agent Chen looked at each of them with something that might have been pity. Because you're never going to leave this building alive to tell anyone else. The words hit the small computer shop like a bomb blast. Charlie's face went white. Betty grabbed Tom's arm for support. Mark took a step backward, clutching Jake's worthless flash drive like a talisman that might protect him from what was coming. You're going to murder us? Betty asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried all the horror of someone who had finally understood the true nature of the people she was dealing with. We're going to clean up a security breach, Agent Chen replied. 3 citizens and 1 foreign national who gained access to classified information and posed a threat to ongoing intelligence operations. Tom looked toward the back door of the shop, calculating the distance and his chances of reaching it before the federal agents could stop him. But even if he made it to the alley, there were probably more agents waiting outside. They had been planning this moment since the chase began at Murphy's auto shop. Charlie's not even American, Mark said desperately. He's just a computer repair guy who got caught up in this by accident. Agent Chen shrugged. He's been operating an illegal surveillance detection business for years, helping people avoid government monitoring, teaching them how to use secure communications, spreading anti-government propaganda through his shop. He was already on our list. Charlie straightened his shoulders and looked Agent Chen in the eye. I've been helping people protect their privacy. That used to be a constitutional right in this country. Constitutional rights are subject to interpretation, Agent Chen said. The interpretation has changed to meet the needs of national security. Mark felt a surge of desperate courage. His brother Jake was dead. His mission to expose government crimes had been turned into a trap, and now he was about to die for nothing. But maybe, just maybe, he could still do something to honor Jake's memory and strike back against the system that had destroyed so many lives. The files, Mark said suddenly. Even if they're fake, people will start asking questions when they see them. They'll want to know if there's any truth behind the lies. Agent Chen nodded approvingly. Very good, Mr. Morrison. You're beginning to understand how the system works. Yes, some people will ask questions. And when they do, we'll be ready with carefully prepared answers that will satisfy their curiosity while directing their attention away from the real operations. You'll create more fake programs for them to investigate, Tom realized. More rabbit holes for truth seekers to disappear down, while the real control systems operate undetected. Exactly, Agent Chen said. Project Blackbird was just one of dozens of fictional programs we've created over the years. Every time someone gets close to discovering the truth about our psychological manipulation systems, we give them a fake program to investigate instead. They waste years chasing shadows while we continue our real work. Betty was crying now, tears running down her cheeks as she understood the full scope of the deception. How many people have you killed to protect these lies? Not as many as you might think, Agent Chen replied. Most people are happy to believe comfortable lies rather than face difficult truths. Your brother was unusual in his persistence and his refusal to be distracted by the false information we fed him. Mark felt a strange pride at Agent Chen's words. Jake had been unusual. Jake had been persistent. Jake had refused to give up even when the odds were stacked against him. Maybe Jake's death would not be meaningless if it inspired other people to ask questions and seek truth. There will be others, Mark said. People who won't be fooled by your fake programs and manufactured distractions. People who will keep digging until they find the real truth. Agent Chen's smile was sad and knowing. There are always others, Mr. Morrison, and we're always ready for them. The system we've created is self-sustaining and self-protecting. It identifies potential threats and neutralizes them before they can do any damage. Tom looked around the computer shop one more time, taking in the familiar sights and smells of a place where people came to connect with the wider world. But now he understood that the wider world was largely an illusion, a carefully constructed reality designed to keep people thinking they were free while actually enslaving them more completely than any physical chains could do. The Internet, Tom said quietly. It was never about connecting people or sharing information. It was always about control. Not always, Agent Chen admitted. The early Internet was genuinely free and open. But freedom and openness are dangerous to those who hold power. So the system was gradually modified, one update at a time, one new feature at a time, until it became what it is today. Charlie was staring at his computers with the expression of someone who had discovered that his life's work had been turned against everything he believed in. All these machines, all this technology I thought was helping people, it's all been corrupted. Corrupted is the wrong word, Agent Chen said. Optimized is better. Optimized to serve the greater good by ensuring social stability and national security. Whose definition of the greater good? Betty demanded. Who gets to decide what's best for the American people? Agent Chen looked at Betty with something that might have been genuine regret. People much smarter than you or me, Mrs. Murphy. People who have access to information you can't imagine. Who understand threats you've never heard of. Who carry the weight of protecting an entire civilization. Mark felt the last of his hope draining away like water through a broken dam. The system was too big, too complex, too well established to be fought by ordinary citizens with good intentions and limited resources. The technology that surrounded them, the information systems they depended on, the very thoughts in their heads, all of it had been compromised by people who believed they knew what was best for everyone else. But even as despair settled over him like a heavy blanket, Mark remembered something his brother Jake had told him years earlier. Even if you can't win, you still have to fight. Because the act of fighting changes who you are, and that change is something they can never take away from you. Mark looked at Agent Chen, at her cold eyes and professional demeanor, and made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of begging for his life or trying to negotiate his way out of the situation, he began to laugh. The sound was startling in the quiet computer shop. Agent Chen frowned, clearly not expecting this reaction from a man who was about to die. "What's so funny, Mr. Morrison?" Mark wiped tears from his eyes and looked at the federal agents surrounding him. "You are. All of you. You think you're so smart, so in control, so powerful. But you're just as trapped as everyone else." Agent Chen's frown deepened. "Explain." "You believe you're protecting America by controlling American citizens," Mark said. "But who's controlling you? Who's feeding you the information that makes you think mass manipulation is necessary? Who's deciding which threats are real and which ones are manufactured?" For the first time since entering the computer shop, Agent Chen looked uncertain. A tiny crack appeared in her professional facade, revealing something human underneath. "We have oversight," she said. "Checks and balances. Democratic accountability," Mark laughed again. "Do you? Or do you just think you do? How do you know the information you receive isn't being manipulated the same way you manipulate everyone else? How do you know you're not just another layer in someone else's control system?" Tom saw what Mark was doing and felt a spark of admiration. Even facing death, Jake's brother was still fighting, still asking the questions that needed to be asked. "The people giving you orders," Tom added. "How do they get their information? Through the same systems you use to control everyone else? Systems that could be feeding the manufactured threats and artificial crises designed to justify their actions." Agent Chen took a step backward, and Tom could see doubt creeping into her eyes. She had spent years believing she was serving a greater good, protecting America from dangerous enemies. But what if those enemies were largely fictional? What if the threats she was fighting were created by the same system she served? "It doesn't matter," Agent Chen said, but her voice lacked its earlier certainty. "The system works. Society is stable. People are safe, are they?" Betty asked quietly. "Are people really safe when they can't trust their own thoughts? Are they really free when their choices are being made for them by algorithms they don't even know exist?" Charlie was nodding slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The system doesn't serve the people in power. It serves itself. It creates threats to justify its existence, then expands its power to deal with those threats, then creates new threats to justify even more expansion." Mark looked directly at Agent Chen. "You're not protecting America. You're feeding it to a machine that grows stronger every time. Someone like my brother gets too close to the truth." The computer shop fell, silent except for the hum of electronic equipment and the distant sound of traffic on the street outside. Agent Chen stood motionless, her professional mask slipping further as the implications of what she was hearing sank in. Finally, she spoke. "Even if everything you're saying is true, it's too late to change anything. The system is too big, too complex, too integrated into every aspect of modern life. Destroying it would cause more harm than letting it continue." "Maybe," Mark admitted. "But people deserve to know the truth. They deserve to make their own choices about what kind of world they want to live in." Agent Chen looked at her watch, then at the other agents in the shop. "This conversation has gone on long enough. We have our orders," but Tom noticed something interesting. The other agents were looking at Agent Chen differently now, like they were seeing her clearly for the first time. The questions Mark had raised were affecting them too, creating doubts about their mission and their methods. "Orders from who?" one of the agents asked. "How do we know those orders are legitimate?" Agent Chen spun around to face him. "Agent Martinez, you're out of line." "Am I?" Martinez replied. "Or am I asking the same questions any rational person would ask after hearing what we just heard?" Tom felt a flicker of hope. If federal agents were beginning to question their orders, maybe there was still a chance that truth could prevail over the system designed to suppress it. Agent Chen pulled out her radio and spoke into it urgently. "Control, this is Chen. We have a situation at the target location. Requesting immediate backup and authorization for code black procedures." The radio crackled with static. Then a voice responded. "Chen, this is Control. Authorization denied. Return to base for debriefing." Agent Chen stared at the radio like it had just spoken in a foreign language. "Control, repeat your last transmission. Did you say authorization was denied?" "Affirmative, Chen. The situation has changed. You and your team are to withdraw immediately and report to headquarters." Tom looked at Mark and Betty, seeing the same confusion and hope in their eyes that he felt in his own heart. Something had changed in the few minutes since Agent Chen had called for backup. But what? Charlie was the first to understand. "The files," he said quietly. "Even though they were fake, people are still reading them. People are asking questions. The system is having to respond to public pressure." Agent Chen's radio crackled again. "Chen, we're monitoring social media traffic. The uploaded files are being shared faster than our suppression algorithms can contain them. Public interest is spiking beyond manageable levels." Mark felt a surge of satisfaction. Even fake evidence could serve a purpose if it got people asking the right questions. Jake's death was still a tragedy, but maybe it would not be completely meaningless. Agent Chen looked at Tom, Betty, Mark, and Charlie with an expression that mixed anger, frustration, and something that might have been respect. "You have no idea what you've unleashed," she said. "The questions you've raised, the doubts you've planted, they'll spread through the system like a virus." "Good," Betty said firmly. "Maybe it's time for the system to get sick. Maybe it's time for people to remember what freedom actually means." Agent Chen holstered her weapon and gestured for the other agents to do the same. "This isn't over. The system will adapt, find new ways to maintain control, create new methods of influence. You may have won this battle, but the war is far from finished." Mark stepped forward and handed Agent Chen the flash drive containing Jake's fake files. "Then maybe it's time to stop fighting the American people and start serving them instead." Agent Chen took the flash drive and looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at each of them one more time before turning toward the door. "The system will remember this," she said. "All of you are now marked as potential threats. Your phones, your internet activity, your financial transactions, everything will be monitored more closely than before." "Let them monitor," Charlie said. "Now that we know we're being watched, we can start watching back." Agent Chen and her team left the computer shop, their footsteps echoing on the sidewalk as they walked back to their cars. Through the window, Tom could see them talking among themselves, their body language suggesting heated disagreement about what had just happened. As the federal agents drove away, the four people remaining in Charlie's computer corner looked at each other with a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and determination. "What happens now?" Betty asked. Mark walked to the window and watched the black cars disappear into traffic. "Now we do what Jake would have wanted us to do. We keep asking questions. We keep looking for truth. And we help other people understand that their freedom depends on their willingness to think for themselves." Tom put his arm around Betty's shoulders. "It's not going to be easy. They'll try to discredit us, isolate us, make other people think we're crazy conspiracy theorists. Let them try," Charlie said. He was already turning on another computer, preparing to continue the fight in the digital realm, where so much of modern life was shaped and controlled. The truth has a way of surviving even when powerful people try to bury it. Mark looked at the empty spot where Jake's flash drive had been, then at his three unlikely allies in the war for America's mind. "Jake used to say that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. I never really understood what that meant until today." Betty wiped the last tears from her eyes and stood up straighter. "It means never trusting anyone who claims to know what's best for you better than you know yourself. It means asking questions even when the answers are frightening." Tom looked around the computer shop at all the machines that connected people to the wider world. "It means understanding that technology is a tool, and tools can be used for good or evil, depending on who's holding them." Charlie began typing on his keyboard, his fingers moving rapidly as he started composing messages to send to journalists. activists, and ordinary citizens around the world. It means that the fight for truth never ends, because there will always be people who prefer comfortable lies to difficult realities. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky over their small town, the four survivors of the Jake Morrison case began planning their next moves in a battle that would last for the rest of their lives. They had learned that the enemies of freedom were more powerful and more subtle than they had ever imagined, but they had also learned that ordinary people, armed with courage and determination, could still make a difference in the fight for truth. And sometimes that was enough to keep hope alive in a world that seemed designed to extinguish it. The story of Jake Morrison was over, but the larger story of America's struggle to remain free had only just begun. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.